Welcome to the Unexplained Truths.
Stories of life healing and unexplained events.
We're your hosts. I'm Julie.
And I'm Genevieve. And on this show, we will explore and uncover the hidden truths about life healing and unexplained events through our guests through real life stories.
So get ready to be educated, enlightened, and inspired through our guests and their stories.
Today, we have Michaela Drageset, who lives in Southern California, where she practices hypnotherapy and instructs yoga. Michaela leads trainings and workshops in both fields and inspires people to find their voice and breathe so they can connect with their highest self and live their most inspired lives. As a single mother of 4, Michaela has learned to grow through the many waves of her life, which for her included being a part of a non-denominational Christian religious cult for 10 years. Michaela shares her spiritual experience, what led her to join, how it impacted her and her relationships, as well as life after she left. Michaela now uses her many life experiences to help her clients live authentic to their core, utilizing yoga and hypnosis, and still loves to study religious philosophy.
Michaela, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So this is a topic that I have probably been...
We've been dying. We've been dying to have this topic on the show.
I've had a very unhealthy obsession with this topic, like most of my life. So I'm super excited to talk to you about this.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
So let's just start by asking, how did you get involved in this organization?
So my experience with getting involved is very expansive in the sense that I always enjoyed, I didn't grow up religious at all, and so I always enjoyed, but I grew up with a lot of like faith. So the idea of studying spiritual books always really interested me. I was invited to study the Bible, and I started studying the Bible. I had some really pivotal moments and experiences where I went to the church. And I was like waitressing at the time. I was introduced to somebody. They asked me to come study the Bible. At first they said no, but we exchanged numbers. And then I ended up losing my job and going to the movies with some of the women from the church. And then they invited me to a service. So I started to, I went to the service the next day, didn't have anything else to do. And I felt deeply convicted at the service by the girl who went up and shared her story, and I had been very judgmental of her, and so I thought I'd study the Bible afterwards, and then it's kind of all downhill from there.
What exactly inspired you to start studying the Bible?
So the girl who got up and shared her testimony on how the Bible, changed her life and all this stuff, she was like this beautiful, blonde, perfect girl. And I thought all of the things that she said that she was before she studied the Bible. And then she said she studied the Bible and it changed her life. And I was like, I wonder what happened and how it did that. And so they invited a bunch of people out afterwards to study the Bible with them, and I was one of them, and then it slowly turned into more and more personal Bible studies, and it got pretty deep really quickly, and there was a point that I remember studying the Bible, and it was about baptism, and I remember driving home thinking that's great, some people choose to get baptized and choose to do this for their life, but that's not going to be me. I didn't have any interest in that. And then 9/11 happened, and my whole foundation kind of was shook, and so it really preempted me to change all of these things, and we don't know how short life is, and and then I got baptized 4 days later.
So just for the audience, because some people might be confused right now who are religious, and So what makes this organization that you were involved in different from a regular, let's say, church or religious organization? Or is there a difference?
So I definitely think that there's a difference. I didn't notice it at the time, how, I didn't know the warning signs. I had never grown up with any religious background for much. I had gone to Catholic school for a couple of years, but I was really young then. And I didn't even, like, this didn't even cross my mind, but I think the smaller, as we got more in depth, like, it's, the ideas of Scientology where they have you explain all of your background stories and confess all of your sins and everything you had done and, anything you thought or physically did. And, there were groups like that. Like, I remember writing down a sins list and, like, detailing everything that I'd ever done because I wanted, to be clean. And then the isolation, the love bombing, and then the isolation from your family and your friends. Shortly after I got baptized, moved in with a household of that church and was completely surrounded by people at church every day, and then attended church like 3 or 4 times a week at the time. Had assigned disciple partners and who we had to confess to and be accountable to all of our sins. And the small, like the group organization of it all, I mean, as I continued in this church for 10 years. And when it came to the financial aspect of it, the relationship aspect of it, it began to control every facet of my life.
What was the financial aspect of it?
We tithed. So about a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years after I got into the church, I guess it was about a year and a half, I ended up getting married. So the majority of my time in the church was while I was married as well. But we tithed and, did all of the benevolences and all of the different retreats, and it gave above and beyond a lot of times.
Right.
I mean, it as we were dealing with our own financial stresses, it definitely overcompensated everything, and we ended up in a lot of debt as well.
And was that mandatory, all the retreats and everything they asked you to do?
It was pretty, like, life in itself just seemed mandatory, the way that we were operating. If you didn't attend something, or if you didn't, go to one of the marriage retreats or something, there was definitely a kind of like, are you struggling? Are you in sin? What's wrong with you?
Right. How often did they have things that you had to go to?
Oh, I attended things at least twice a week, if not more.
Wow. So it wasn't a situation where you had to go every single day, or not necessarily a retreat or something as intense as that, but did you have to participate every single day or do something for the cult every single day?
I mean, we were asked to reach out to people every single day. We were asked to invite people to study the Bible with. The idea was to study the Bible with somebody every day.
Right.
But as the time went on in the church, and I moved from being single in the church to being, newly married in the church, and then to having kids, like, it definitely transitioned in how it went. And, in the end, it was like, I was just trying to be a mom to 4 very little kids, and trying to stay in contact with the other women in my life, and, studying the Bible and having discipling conversations. I was definitely in contact with people from the church every single day.
Right.
And were there any rules about you having connections with people outside of the organization?
I wouldn't maybe say rules, but definitely high suggestions. When there were definitely expectations set when you study the Bible on the kind of relationships that you held, as well as very slowly weeding out different kind of influences in your life. From a very, when I started in the church, my best friends both have stories of people in the church coming up to them and saying, you know, look, you're not going to get in the way of her spirituality. This is not like a situation. And I did end up losing a lot of contact with those friends over the years. So my best friend and I, we've been friends since we were 7, and during that time, I maybe only saw her 3 times.
Wow.
You know, and we talked very infrequently, and it was, you know, it was definitely something when I came out of the church, and as I started to come out of the church, she had started to become more prominent in my life, and again, and like it was a stronghold and foundation for me when I got out.
So I'm kind of dying to know, who was organizing this? Like, who's the leader? Who's the person doing all the brainwashing?
So,
And what's the point?
What's the what?
What's like the objective of this organization too, I guess?
Control.
I mean, so the church that I belong to has transformed quite a bit over the years. It started, I believe, in Florida, and it started from just a very small campus group that kind of expanded and continued to expand. And I do believe that in a lot of ways their intentions were very like pure, and they wanted to just live by the Bible, and it just continued to transform over the years. So it just the expectations and the way, the commitment that you had to give to the church kind of expanded. I mean, in the earlier parts of the years, and the earlier parts of even when I attended, you know, the leaders of the church were all paid staff. They had very nice houses, cars, like their lives were paid for.
Of course they were.
It was definitely a power thing. The leaders in the church definitely had some, you know, had a spiritual power over the people that were not in the leadership, and it was a train that went down. You know, I remember just wanting to be in leadership so badly, and you know, when I had my own discipling partner that I looked over, and you know, and you can see that kind of path with the church that I was a part of.
And do you think it started out wanting to be spiritual, but then it just something happened, or was it a person that got into control that just had it all kind of toppled down from there? Or because it sounds like it started, like maybe it started as a good thing, but then it really transformed into this whole other situation.
Yeah, I do think that it started with a group of people that really just wanted to study the Bible and save people from hell. And it just had a really high focus on impending doom, on you going to hell, really instilled that fear. And it does in the people that you're studying the Bible with. So I think it had good intentions, but it just, as it continued to grow, and it did grow, that it just, you know, it got a little, I don't know, power hungry, money hungry, and all of the sense.
That's what I was going to ask, is when the people in control saw the potential for power and money, do you think that that's really where it turned?
Yeah, I mean, I came in even after that. So by the time I came in, I was kind of towards the end, I remember a couple years after I had been in the church, a letter was sent out from a person, I think his name was called Henri Rochard, and he sent out a letter to all of the churches explaining his ideas and how the church was really being misled and was being led like a cult, and how all of these different things financially needed to change, all of these things spiritually needed to change. And I remember a lot of transformation that started to happen in the church, but there was still a lot of residual training, I guess.
Sorry. No, I was going to say that's just so interesting to me and crazy because, I mean, I never studied the Bible, but I'm pretty sure isn't greed a sin?
You really, you find out, that, there was a lot of different things that happened. There were a lot of leaders that ended up having affairs with people. There was a lot of sin. I mean, that's the thing you start to realize, and I think when you're in situations like that, you learn that nobody's perfect. And the more that people are trying to be perfect, the more imperfect they are.
Absolutely. Amen.
And so when you're on the inside and you've been there a little while, was there any odd behavior or odd, let's say, rituals or anything that you saw going on that you were like, that's not really in alignment with what we're doing here?
I really I mean, for me, I became so into the Bible that I started to really question a lot of the discrepancies of well, why do you celebrate Christmas and why do you celebrate Halloween if you say you follow the Bible? Those two things don't go hand in hand for me at all. So the more that I studied my Bible, the more I saw discrepancies in that, which then led to other discrepancies that I was I don't understand how you could say one thing and then do something else, and began to see a lot of the hypocritical actions. But I mean, I think the biggest fear was after you spent time in that situation was seeing that when people left, they were you weren't a part of it anymore. Kind of that whole sense of excommunication. Right. So for my example, when I left the church, I had built relationships with all of these people for over a decade, had children with them, shared secrets with them, helped them in their marriage, they helped me, whatever. And not a single person spoke to me for a very long time. I think I just saw people for the first time, and it's been almost 5 years.
Wow.
And what led you to leave?
It was a huge host of events that were personal. One of them was my grandmother passing away, and that made a very big impact in my perspective of death, and really took away that fear of dying and going to hell. And then another experience was just my relationship with my husband at the time. I started to really see discrepancies as people in my life were passing away, of how I wanted to build my life and my relationships and my family.
And is your ex-husband still in the organization?
No, he's not. He stayed for a little bit after we got divorced, and then ended up leaving himself.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you feel like you have regrets for the time that you spent there, or do you feel like you learned a lot?
A little bit of both. I do feel like I learned a lot about myself, a lot about who I am, a lot of spirituality. It really did give me a very deep insight into the Bible, into people and psychology, and how the mind works and what it's capable of. Yeah. But I definitely, and just a spiritual exploration of myself, I didn't swear pretty much almost at all for 10 years. And, if you know me, like I can just have a sailor mouth. So, and I did before I was in the church, and I definitely do now. I'm a little bit more balanced with it, but the idea, I guess the sense I'm trying to get across is that I was able to, be completely self-controlled in a lot of areas. And so it really gave me an understanding of myself that I look at it as my aesthetic spiritual life. Like, I didn't do a lot of things, and I learned how to fast. I learned how to have immense self-control in a lot of areas of my life if I choose to.
Right.
Right.
And do you feel like there was a lot of brainwashing going on inside the organization?
Oh, I look back at my brain now, and I'm still unraveling some of the things that were put in there.
Wow.
I'm very much still trying to understand some of the different beliefs and patterns and perspectives that I had then, and trying to unravel them now with myself and even my expectations of my children. One of them for me that had a huge impact, and now I think I'm very much rebelling against, is the way I express myself physically, sexually, and with clothing. Now I enjoy full fitness classes and, acro yoga and aerial yoga, and, we'll be in my bathing suit all day, every day, public, not public. Like, before, when I was in the church, it was very, and it's still something I'm working through, but I was very shamed for my body, and it was looked upon very much as something that was a sin because it made other people struggle with sin.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you're talking about the way that affects your sex life with your partner, your spouse, your interpersonal relationships, way you raise your children, whatever. I mean, the list goes on.
Are you a part of anything now? Are you a part of a church now, or a spiritual group, or anything? No? Solo?
Spiritual group, I definitely am somebody that is naturally drawn to, spirituality, insight.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely have people in my life that are still, I have friends that still went to that used to go to the church but left before I did, that I still am in contact with. We don't talk like we used to with discipling and stuff like that, but we're definitely there to hear and listen to each other and understand that perspective of our lives. But I definitely still do, with practicing yoga, I find myself reading different religious books and studying spirituality and more of an energetic experiences with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Michaela and I met through a hypnosis class, and I had an personal experience where I felt like I had been slightly brainwashed, and I don't know if that's completely why I went in that direction, but I'm curious if that may be part of the reason why you got into hypnosis.
I definitely think that there were parts of it that affected that for sure.
Yeah.
And I, looking back even now, with the experiences I've had with hypnosis and the different, practitioners that I've worked with or gotten help with, and as I learn more, how to control your own thoughts and what's being put in there. But it definitely is still a thing for me that I'm very cautious of what is put into my head.
Yeah.
So hypnosis is a very empowering thing for you.
Yeah, for me it really helps me unravel and has helped me learn that I have control of my unconscious mind, my patterns, my beliefs, and I get to decide what they are.
Absolutely.
I think everyone should learn hypnosis just as a form of protection.
I do for sure as well. Not just protection, but as protection. I mean, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to listening to music, all of
everything.
those things can be a sense of brainwashing, and the way that our culture is designed, and it really, our cultures can be designed, it really needs to be up to you how you want to come and show up in this world.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about what you're doing now, how things have been since you left.
So since I've left, it was very challenging in the beginning, and now it's been a process of just self-development. So I started to practice yoga towards the end, and that was one of the big things that really opened my eyes and saw and made me see that like I was not living true to who I was internally, and that's why I was having so many depressive episodes and so much anxiety. And so as I left the church and continued to practice yoga, I began to notice all of those things change. I really started to follow things that I felt like were my path. I studied yoga for first responders, aerial yoga, and continued to move more in the energetics. For a while, I even started doing intuitive reading for people and reading tarot cards.
Oh, wow.
And yeah.
Is that recently?
Yeah, it was like a 180. This was a couple of years ago.
Okay.
How long has it been since you left?
It's been about 5 years.
Okay.
I think in September it was just hit 5 years.
Wow. And so,
Yeah.
wow. So when you left, you were really able to tune into everything. I mean, into yourself and into your connection with spirit and into your connection with your intuition too. I think that's amazing. You've been doing intuitive readings.
Yeah.
Because that was probably extremely frowned upon. Yeah? Like I can only imagine how frowned upon that was in your cult.
Don't use your own mind ever.
So frowned upon. Like you have, like it's hard to even put it into words and express how frowned upon it was and how negatively it felt to, you know, at one point I owned a set of runes and that I'd had since I was a kid, and I remember getting rid of them, and it still is something that like saddens me today that I got rid of them and that I don't have them. And you know, but in my head at the time I was just so deep in sin if I even had them. And so the amount of guilt and pressure that comes along with that was really an experience and an interesting perspective to have on life, and is one that I'm very grateful that I don't have in life anymore.
Yeah.
So after, you know, going into the tarot reading, I started, you know, I was doing yoga during the whole time, teaching it, and I started to move into more of the hypnosis and the way that the mind and the nervous system is affected by our thoughts. And now I deal with a lot more of that area and helping people kind of overcome their anxieties, fears, phobias, and, you know, whether it be negative habits or patterns, and kind of help them build the life that they want to live.
Yeah, that's so cool. And probably if you hadn't gone through this negative experience, it may not have led you to where you are now, right?
I mean, I definitely don't think that I would have the same amount of knowledge that I have and insight.
Yeah.
Whether it's, you know, insight in how we can change or insight spiritually, I think that this experience is definitely something that, you know, I don't want to say it's karma, but it was for me my path, and I think a lot of people, I've met actually quite a few people who have gone through similar experiences but in different ways, whether it was even yoga that became like their cult, that they just dove into so deep for, you know, a decade, that was all their life was about. You know, that they came out and was just like, okay, let me find balance. For me, it was really, I had no previous structures, and so I think it gave me just structure that I needed at the time.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to somebody who might feel like they want to be a part of something and maybe is considering one of these groups or organizations, whether it's yoga or whether it's a cult or whether it's religion?
So it's funny, I've had this conversation with my mom before, even regarding my little brother, and I've told her sometimes, I'm like, maybe he just needs to go be in a cult for a little while. Like,
I mean, it's a learning experience, yeah? I mean, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
I mean, do you really think that you would be where you are now if you hadn't been in that cult?
No, I definitely don't.
Yeah.
I would have, I mean, there's so many reasons why I wouldn't be where I'm at right now if it wasn't for the cult. One of them was that I probably wouldn't have stayed in Orange County or Southern California that long if it wasn't for the cult. And being married like that, that just would not have happened.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I look at the structure that it gave me, and just kind of the balance that I needed to be able to learn about myself
Right.
in a deeper way. And you know, my mom will laugh at me when I say that. She's like, no, because then it just adds on to that layer of all the things you have to unravel. And I'm like, okay, you got me there. Like, that's true. I've definitely had to unravel a lot of that. And there's still things I'm unraveling that are, you know, that come up. And so I see that as well. But at the same time, like, I'm very appreciative for the experiences that I learned to be able to just know that I am in charge of my life and I am creating my experience.
Yeah. And I'm sorry to backtrack to Julie's question, because I kind of interrupted your answer to Julie's question about what would you say to someone who's thinking of joining one of these groups or a cult or?
I would say a lot of people don't think about it. It just kind of happens to them.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't like looking and being like, oh my gosh, I want to go join a cult. How do I do it? We're going to sign up for this cult. Like, that's not how that happens.
I think a lot of people feel lost and they just want to be a part of something.
Yeah.
And when they get approached,
Yeah.
you know, by this group, by, you know, whoever, and they're made to feel like they belong or they're worthy or whatever it is that they're wanting to feel, that it's easy to get sucked in.
Exactly what it was. I mean, I can look back now and I can see the values that are important to me in my life, and they're still important. They're the same ones that were important to me then. It's just that I thought the church was going to be able to fulfill those values. And when they weren't able to, is kind of as I started to lose steam, when I started to realize, like, this isn't going to fulfill my values and my things that I want to accomplish in life, and it was hindering me. And that was when I started to kind of see the discrepancies more and more. But I look at, there was a Netflix documentary on a cult up in Oregon.
I know what you're talking about.
Oh my God,
We're obsessed with that show.
That's a good show.
I'm so obsessed with that show.
Wild Country, right?
Wild
Yes,
Country.
Wild
We're so
Country.
obsessed. Sheila is everything.
We want to get Sheila on the show so bad.
So Sheila, if you're listening,
Sheila.
So that show, my heart went out to both of them. And to Sheila, like, I totally got it and I totally understood, and I can see how and why she did everything that she did and understand it and empathize with it.
Wow.
And it really, you know, and then you look at the people who at the end, who were the people that were homeless that came in and got to live on this farm and have this, you know, utopian experience in their perspective, even though there was all this other shady stuff going on behind the doors. like, they didn't want to leave it.
Yeah.
Right. It was safe.
They
It
didn't
felt
want-
safe to them.
It was an amazing experience to them that they were like, I want this. I don't want to go back to everything that's out in the world, because that stuff is just not what they wanted in life, and it fulfilled their values. And so I think that there's a lot of people in the way that we've created our communities and our culture that whose values aren't being fulfilled. And we don't give them an outlet for it, and we don't create space for it, and so they feel lost.
Yeah.
And when they're approached by somebody in a cult and they're feeling lost, that is where it becomes an unfortunate situation.
Right.
But I think that those people, they're the waitresses, they're the, the people working at the checkout stand, there are the people working in the office filing the invoices.
They're people in their
They're the
20s.
people in their 20s. But it really, yeah, exactly. I mean, I was 18. Like, I just
Wow.
I just didn't, I didn't know. And I think, for the people and the family and the friends that are around the people that kind of get into these cults, I think that one of the biggest things that helped me towards the end as well was my mom lived close by, and she hadn't lived close by. And she was spending a lot of time with me in my house and with my kids, and she just kept saying to me, Michaela, this is not right. Michaela, this is not right. Michaela, this is not right. And, I would fight her tooth and nail, and then all of a sudden it was enough, and I was like, oh my gosh, like,
This isn't
I'm
right.
really not happy, and this is not right.
Yeah. Michaela, this is not right.
This is not right.
So, no, I'm serious. My mom, like, there were so many things when it came to, like, parenting and the way it affected the way I was raising my children at the time. My mom really, it took a lot of people for me, a lot of situations for me to see, but for the people that are around those friends and families, like, stick by them. Don't just let them fade away. Keep reminding them who they are.
Yeah.
I remember after I got my divorce, and I was talking with a friend that I'd known since I was 7. It was my best friend's brother, and I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore. And he just said, you're Michaela Drageset. And I was just like, whoa, I am. Like, that's a person.
Yeah.
And I was watching a video even with Will Smith and Jada Pinkett the other day, and or Jada Smith, and she was saying that one of the rough times during their marriage,
Yes.
she had to step back and she had to find out who she was, not as Jada Smith,
Yeah.
and really, like, go back to her roots. And I think that there's something to that.
Yeah.
Married, or when you are in a cult or anything like that, like, stepping back to really see who you are, being reminded that that's who you are.
Right. Even if you're in a job that you hate.
Exactly.
Sometimes that will cloud your identity, and you lose track of it. You lose track of yourself and your own identity, and
That's a good point.
your values.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious,
Yes.
how do you feel this situation? I know your children were little at the time, but how do you feel this has affected them and their life, or has it?
It has greatly. I would definitely say that my older 2 children, who were at the time 7 and 5, 6 years old, when they left the church, or when we left the church, were mostly impacted. They have the most memories about it, the most, traumas in the way that it affected our personal dynamics as a family. And, my oldest one, she pretty much refuses to pray at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she has definitely some spiritual sense to her and a spiritual side, but it definitely affected her idea of God and her perspective of God. And it's something that, I'm aware of and, keeping an eye on and encouraging her to find her own perspective on it, and listen to her own self.
Yeah.
And wants to believe. And, I just kind of keep giving her different opportunities. My youngest one, she was so little at the time, she's like, church? What's church? I don't even know what that is. She's like, she has no idea, like, she doesn't really remember even our family dynamics at the time. She doesn't realize, why things, she just doesn't remember at all. So she has no concept. She doesn't remember any of the stories that she used to hear, or kind of that whole experience. So, but my oldest one, she remembers, like, when we stopped going to church and all of her friends no longer being her friends. That was very challenging for her as well, because again, like, these were people that she had known since she was in the womb.
Right.
And she was 7 years old, and all of a sudden, like, didn't get to see her friends anymore. And, the best friends that were friends with mommy, like, are now, mommy's crying because they said mean things to her. They went to court to talk against her. They, won't call her back. There's no play date set up. So my oldest one definitely went through it, in a lot of sense.
Do you think that she had any resentment towards you for leaving and not being able to be with her friends anymore?
I know that in the beginning she knew that the reason why I stopped was to protect her and to help her and keep her safe. I know that she's gone through different feelings at the time. She held a lot of resentment to my mother at the time. She, like if there was anybody that she could have blamed at the time, it was my mom. She doesn't anymore. She's now old enough at 13, almost 14, to see and understand what happened. But at the time, she blamed my mom 100% for everything, for leaving, for the church, for the divorce, for me not being a stay-at-home mom anymore. She took it all out on my mom.
Oh, sweet angel.
Yeah.
So what is your perspective on the Bible now?
I have read the Bible front to back, more than once. I have studied it in different languages, and I appreciate it as a tool. I believe that there's a lot of fascinating information in there, whether it be spiritual. I think that it is misinterpreted and misunderstood, and it is fed to people that have no business, I don't want to say no business reading it, but they're not seeing it in its entirety. There's a lot of amazing information if you're able to look past the words in the Bible.
Yeah,
I don't even know how else to say that.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
There's amazing numerical patterns in there when you start looking at, like, cymatics, and you start looking at music. There is amazing spiritual information that is in there.
So I've never read the Bible. Do you believe the stories are true, or do you believe they're just metaphors to teach us certain, I don't know, ideas?
Well, so I also study other religious texts, and one of my favorite ones, and I remember being in a yoga philosophy class through Loyola Marymount, and we were reading the Upanishads, which is a compilation of the Vedas, which are the oldest texts ever written in the world.
Wow.
And I remember reading the very first few stories and being like, wait a minute, this is the Bible verbatim in Genesis. And some of the other stories throughout, different mythologies, they're really, it's all the same. So I believe that there are definitely truths in the stories. I believe that a lot of the stories probably did happen to some extent. There's stories in the Bible that you're like, why would anybody write that down? It's so horrific.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know, I don't want to say the word sinful, but, just so, you read it and it's a melodrama. Some of the stuff that happened and goes on, people being sold into slavery, people's children having, affairs with them, with the parents, and then the spouses, and then the sister. It's very graphic.
Yeah. I think there are...
People realize how graphic the Bible is, and it's a very, very interesting story. I suggest everybody to read it at least once. I think it's an amazing story in some ways.
There are a lot of lessons in it.
Oh, yeah.
It
is chock full of lessons, and you can always find something in there to inspire you. I think that getting lost in the words is where the issue is.
Right. Yeah.
Because a lot of the people that go to church, they hold those words into a dogma, and it's just not, that's not the point of the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious to know how are you, or were you able to mend some of your relationships with people that you had lost while you were in the cult once you had gotten out? Or is that still an ongoing process, or no?
I guess I would say ongoing process. I have remained friends with people that had left the church as well, and we were able to kind of, repair relationships. As it comes to people that are still in the church, there are people that I used to be best friends with that we actually had children that went to school together for a short minute, and so I would see them, and we could barely even say hi to each other. So there's a lot of mending that has definitely still not been done. I went to a friend's son's graduation party the other day for the first time, saw several people from church, and it was the first time in years. And, relationships can, we're cordial.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's about it. There's no, I would say, the relationships weren't very deep to begin with.
Right.
They were deep in a way that they surrounded a situation. They surrounded, the church. And so when the church was gone, there wasn't anything to keep that relationship valid.
Right. There wasn't anything that you had in common that you could connect with. Yeah. Because, what else are they connecting with other than what you're a part of?
Yeah, there just wasn't a lot of substance to it.
Does it kind of take over your whole life, really? It becomes like what your life is about?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely was everything my life was about at that time. It's weird to me because I've lived in relatively the same area for almost 18 years. I've lived now in the same city for 14, 15 years, and the majority, over half of those years, was spent in the cult. And so since, like at that time, I didn't really know anybody in my area or my community or my neighborhood. And since I left the cult and now am out in my community, in my neighborhood, teaching yoga classes, I am building my own community. I run into people everywhere I go and, have different friends and different, groups that, I hang out with. And so I really kind of trip out on the fact that, like, if I would have really been in this community for the last 18 years that I lived in Orange County and the last, 15 or so years that I've been in Costa Mesa, Newport, then I would have really, like, had a very expansive network compared to what I have now.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, my only network was the church, and that was my entire focus at the time.
And was it, I want to be careful with this question because I don't want you to share anything that you don't feel comfortable sharing, but was it like something that happened on a certain day that you were just like, I'm out, I'm done? I mean, I know you said there were some things that built up that you were noticing along the way, but for you to really make that decision of I'm out, I'm done.
Yeah, there was. I had been a stay-at-home mom for a very long time. I had, nursed 4 kids, and during that time I watched a ton of documentaries. I watched a lot of science stuff. I watched a lot of physics stuff. I'm kind of a dork in that way. And it was my 10th spiritual birthday, and I remember going down to the beach, and it was kind of my time that I was able to get away and really do some reflecting with God. And I went down to where I was baptized 10 years prior, and I remember just sobbing on the beach and crying about my life and where it had brought me and how unhappy that I was, and how I felt just like everything was so wrong. And, I prayed, and I remember hearing God say, like, it's okay. You're done now. You don't have, like, you've done the work. You've learned everything you need to here. You're done. You don't need to do this anymore. I have something better planned for you. And I eventually got up, and I went and got myself some food, and then I came home, and it was just me awake, and I sat down and I watched a funny movie on Netflix called What the Bleep Is It Anyway? I can't even remember what it's called.
What the bleep do you know? What the bleep do you know?
What the bleep do you know?
Yeah.
What the bleep do you know? I watched that documentary, and my mind was just blown. I was like, that was it. The next day, I told my husband at the time, I said, I think that it would be best if I stayed home and meditated on my own, and I think I would accomplish more doing that spiritually than I will going to church. So I will not be going to church anymore.
Wow.
Wow.
What was his reaction?
He was, I was always more the one that was into the church than he was. And so he at the time was very much just like, okay, I support you on that. And he continued to go. He kind of continued to go. I think he took the kids for a couple weeks, and, at that time, you know, I'm trying to think of like the timelines because we hadn't fully separated then, so it wasn't that I wasn't kind of still a part of the church, but it was like, I remember I had a couple friends contact me right after that, and then shortly after that, I decided that I wanted to separate from my husband at the time, and that was a whole other aspect to it, and it was around the time when I decided I wanted to separate that everybody from church just, as soon as I said I wanted to separate from him, there was not a single word that was spoken back to me. When I came at them at why I was getting separated and what was going on, they heard me once and they took on their own perspectives, and that was that. They never called me again.
I think when you first told me the story, you told me that it was sort of their job to actually reach out to people who they felt like might be leaving, and when you left, it was like crickets. Like, why do you think that was?
We have to wrap this up soon.
So I think a lot of the reason why it was is because my ex-husband and I, at the time, we portrayed this example of kind of the perfect family. And I was very close with a lot of the women. I had helped a lot of people in their relationships and parenting. I had won Best Mom of the Year, multiple years. We showed this exemplary family, and I kind of just blew it all up into their face. And I think when I did that, I not only did that, but I called them out on their own relationship and their own family, and they did not want to look at themselves.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so they just they knew that I knew my Bible, they knew that I knew what I was talking about, and I think that they did not want to acknowledge where their lives really were.
Right. Wow. Well, Michaela, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us, and thank you. And I really admire you for stepping into yourself, and I wish you so much love and light on everything that you're doing right now.
Thank you very much. I hope that anything I shared today is helpful to somebody out there and gives somebody some more understanding and insight to the impact that it can have.